I think that we're going to get a glimpse into the future right now. So excited to call upon Landmark's dear friend. He's got a great name, Scott Harrison, from Charity Water. Talk about how virtual reality is changing charity and cause marketing. So, Scott, there you are.
Thank you. How you doing, buddy? Thanks. Morning, everyone. You guys hear me? Yeah? Excited to be here. I'm going to talk a little bit about VR. I'll just give a short background on Charity Water. How many of you have not heard of us? Okay, that's exciting. All right. So we are focused on ending the water crisis. Now, this is something most of you probably don't think about every day, but there are 663 million people living around the world without access to clean water. 663 million people today are drinking water like this. Girls like Howa drinking from a swamp. Kids like John Bosco using this water to bathe, to drink, to cook with. And we think it's not okay just because people are born into these situations, not born into the privilege that so many of us in this room were born into. It's not okay that they drink dirty water. So we are trying to see an end to the water crisis in our lifetime. I started Charity Water 10 years ago, exactly 10 years ago, to do that. Now, when I was 30 when I started, and I just come off a decade of nightclub promoting. So my former profession was very different. I was a cocaine-addled club kid who was going out at 10, coming back at noon. And I did that for about 10 years and realized that I'd actually turned myself into the worst person that I knew somehow. And made a radical change, joined a humanitarian mission in Liberia right after the war ended, where I saw this problem, where I saw people drinking dirty water. Now, I had been selling Voss water to rich people in nightclubs for 20 bucks. People would come in, they'd buy 20 bottles of water, not even open them. And I couldn't believe that so many humans live without this basic need. So I started Charity Water to do something about it. The problem was, as I tried to get my friends excited about this issue, I realized people don't trust charities. And I wanted to reinvent charity. I wanted to create a new model for, millennial wasn't a term then, but for people my age and younger who weren't giving to the March of Dimes or the Red Cross and would never give $1 to the United Way. They weren't putting checks in self-addressed stamped envelopes as people bought their mailing addresses. So this is the problem. In fact, 42% of Americans don't trust charities. So this is a big deal, right? We have this incredible cultural heritage of generosity. No one is more generous than Americans, but yet almost half the people in this country feel betrayed by the system. And that was what we were trying to solve. So we've done that 3 ways. The first was trying to create a business model where people couldn't use the excuse, how much of my money will actually reach people? How much of my money will actually get there? So we said, what if we could answer this question 100% and take the most common objection people have completely off the table? So I didn't know how this would work out at the beginning, but I opened up 2 bank accounts with $100 each and said, we will always use 100% of the public's money. We will even pay back credit card fees. So if you guys gave $1,000 on your Amex and I got $970, we would make up the difference and we'd send every single penny to the field. To do that, we started building a giving program called The Well. And I started going to people in technology and business saying, hey, would you donate to help me hire staff and build an infrastructure and pay for the office costs so that I can go to the public with this 100% model? And an incredible 115 families from business, from technology, even from sports and entertainment have joined this giving program called The Well. And everybody signs up for 3-year commitments and all their money goes to overhead. That's allowed us to go to the public with this 100% model. The second is just to use technology to prove where people's money went. And this seems so simple to us, but charities didn't tell people where their money went. And people would give into the void, into the black hole. And Charity Water started the same year as Google Earth, and we realized that Google had given us a free place to put every water point, every water project we would ever fund in the world. And we made that publicly transparent from day one. So anyone in this room, you guys can go to REI, go buy a $50 handheld GPS device, and visit 20,000 projects now in 24 countries. We think it would take you about 15 years. But that entire data set has been public. Third thing was to work through local partners. I'd seen people make a mess of charity by sending well-intentioned white people to Africa, to India, to Asia, and they just got it all wrong. So we would raise the awareness. We'd get people to care about this issue. We would raise a lot of money, and then we'd work through the local organizations so that this work could be sustainable. And it would be locals leading their own communities and their own countries forward. So that was the model. We built the brand on digital storytelling. We've now made over 500 videos. We never direct mailed because we just thought it was stupid. I mean, I don't even know that it works for you guys. When someone sends you a catalog and asks you to write a check to an organization you've never heard of, does it work? You know, the March of Dimes recently sent me a dime in the mail. I mean, the thought of a charity actually sending people money to make them feel guilty for pocketing the dime, this was not the future. So we became the first charity to get 1 million Twitter followers. We became the first charity to use Instagram, built up a community of people around the world, and we always tried to use social to celebrate them, to make our fundraisers, our volunteers, to make our community the hero. So many charities get this wrong. They make themselves the hero. Look at us. Look how great we are. We're running around saving the world. And we instead celebrated our community on social time and time again. We focused on radical transparency. This was something missing in the sector. And we found ways to build online products that could track every single dollar. So if a 4-year-old gave $4, we could show her the exact village and show her photos and GPS of the project where that $4 wound up. We started funding drilling rigs. We mounted GPS units on our drilling rigs so people could track them as they drilled in real time. We even gave them Twitter accounts. So our drilling rigs tweet their location. A bunch of Ethiopian drillers jump up, press a button, and it tweets, "I'm here drilling a rig, drilling this well." As the organization began to scale quickly, 500% growth in the first few years, and with all these projects around the world, we knew they were all built, but we wanted to know they were working over time. So we went to Google and we said, we have this crazy idea. What if we could build a sensor that would work in a remote environment and we could install it, and back in New York, we would know not only that these projects were working 5 or 7 years from now, maybe some of you, your families have actually funded water projects, and you've got a nice little well up on your refrigerator with a magnet. Do you know if it's working 3 years later, 5 years later, 7 years later? So we wanted to. And we pitched Google this idea, could we develop a sensor? They actually wrote us a $5 million check, which was the largest check they'd ever written a nonprofit at that time to go and develop this. And we worked with 20 labs over 3 years. We created a sensor for $110, open sourced everything, which is protecting a $10,000 water project asset. And we began installing them across our projects. And this is the amazing thing now, that I could tell a donor like Daniel Ek from Spotify, who sponsored a water project, I can dive into Ethiopia, show him his exact water project, not only the photos and the GPS, but now I can tell him how much water is flowing every single year, or every single day, 4 years later. And I can say that last Thursday, women got up very early in the morning at dark, and they took 2,329 liters of clean water from a $10,000 investment he made 4 years ago. So this is the kind of transparency that we're continuing to try to push forward. It's worked in 9 years. The organization's raised over $225 million from 1 million unique supporters. About a quarter of that has been brand-based. So 75% of the money has been raised by 1 million unique individuals, and the average donation size is very small, powered by social. We've used that to change the lives of 6.4 million people, giving clean water to 6.4 million people across the world. We now employ 1,500 locals across 24 different countries. Small staff of 78 in New York that's making this possible. But we've only solved 1% of the problem. So the last 10 years of my life, we've given 1% of the people on Earth that needed clean water, this most basic need, access to clean water. So we have a lot more to do. So when VR came, one of the biggest challenges, guys, for us is trying to get people to care, to be quite honest. This problem doesn't affect your kids. Your kids are not walking 8 hours with 40 pounds of dirty water on their back. Your kids aren't dying of diarrhea. They're not dying of dehydration. So we just don't, this problem doesn't affect us. So for years, we've been trying to get people to care, trying to put names and faces to these mind-numbing statistics. And when VR came along, I was very, very excited and got this idea to try to shoot one water project, the transformation of actually not just a project, not a village, but one girl over the 6 days when her life would change. So we got 8 modified GoPros. We strapped them to a rig. We wrapped them with duct tape. And we tried to shoot our first VR film last May. And we found this extraordinary 13-year-old girl. Her name was Salam. Her mother had jumped off a cliff, committed suicide when she was young, so she was taking care of her father and her 2 kids. And she'd never had clean water in her entire life. Now, terrible irony, she was living on top of massive amounts of clean water. Solution for her village was 10 grand to drill a well for 300 people. So we filmed her story over 6 days, the 6 days where everything got clean water, and we hoped that people would put on the headset and actually be there at that swamp, feel like they were drinking the brown, viscous water that this 13-year-old girl was drinking, water we would never give our children. And that they might feel something, and they would go through this process as the well was drilled. And on day 6, as Salam got clean water for the first time in their life, maybe this would move people with a greater empathy, with greater compassion, to care for our brothers and sisters living thousands of miles away, who we're not immediately selling products to right now. So we made this film called The Source. We released it on Facebook. It got over 1.5 million views just in the first few days, as people were interested in this new medium. And then I had this idea, what if we could do this at our gala? What if as we went into the Metropolitan Museum and as I got 400 people in their black tie tuxedos, and gave them a nice dinner, what if I could strap a headset on them at the end of dinner and press play in synchronicity? And all 400 people would be transported to Ethiopia. And then when it ended, I would ask them for money. So I wasn't sure we could pull this off. We couldn't get the devices at first. Finally, Verizon and Samsung came through for us. And I figured, to do this with integrity, I really needed to fly to Ethiopia just to show Salam her story and tell her how we were going to use it. So this was my 27th trip to Ethiopia. I flew back. I strapped a headset on her in her remote village. She got to see the finished piece, the 8 minutes, detailing that week when her entire life changed through clean water. Thankfully, she loved it. She said konjo in her language, which means beautiful. And then I told her I was going to use her story to help millions more girls just like her. So at about 10 o'clock in December last year, 150 volunteers walked out with trays carrying VR devices, strapped them on our guests in the Temple of Dender, and then we pressed play at the same time, and people went to Ethiopia. Many came back, many took the headsets down weeping, and then they gave $2.4 million and helped another 240 villages get clean water. We continued to see success. This guy named David walks into my office at the end of December, and he'd just given $200,000. So he was coming in to be thanked. Now this guy he'd Googled good charities and found us. Writes a $200,000 check. So someone on the phone's like, hey, we're real. Why don't you come into the Tribeca office and meet people? So he comes into my office. I spent 30 minutes with him, and his money was going to Ethiopia. And I said, hey, on your way out, why don't you just watch this film and try to just understand what meaning your gift really has. 20 communities will be forever changed because you wrote that check. So he puts on the headset. I don't see this. He takes it down. Apparently, he's weeping. He throws his wallet down on our glass conference table, and he says to Nicole in our office, he says, I haven't done enough. Writes another $400,000 check. So moved by a very, very simple story. We started taking it to the streets of New York, showing kids on rollerblades. We started taking it to the festivals. And then recently, I wanted to take it to public spaces. I live in Battery Park City with a couple kids. I walk through this space called Brookfield all the time. And I just found the event manager and said, hey, crazy idea. Could I take over this space for a month and show people VR? And they said, sure. So we concepted this idea. We wanted to do it really low budget, where we would put people into cubes, into these little oval kiosks, I guess, and we would show them the film all day long in public space and hope to raise awareness and empathy among this group. So the big idea was I wanted every view to unlock $30. I'm so sick of charity stopping people on the streets with clipboards, asking you for your time, and you're busy, and then asking you for your money. So I thought, let's turn this whole thing on its head. Let's introduce people to a new technology. Let's get them to cry. But then let's have their time earn $30. So I went to a donor and said, would you help put up $500,000 that I could unlock through these activations, so that I could promise people just watching this film, just stepping into someone's shoes for a few moments, would give one person clean water and unlock $30. So that was the value proposition. We built it. They let us put up a couple-story banner for 3 weeks down in Brookfield Place, which was cool. People were coming in on the ferry, sending me pictures of this. And then we took over the Winter Garden for 3 weeks. We built these kiosks. There were lines of 30 to 60 minutes for 3 weeks as people were lining up to see this film. We weren't sure if anybody would come. That was the big question. Would this just be a complete failure? Does anyone want to see a charity film in the middle of their day on their way to the food court? And it worked. People lined up. They were moved. People were giving on the spot, donating. We wound up putting 12,494 people through the experience and unlocking $394,000 in donations. It'll be interesting for us to track this cohort going forward. Do they give over the next year, over the next 2 years? Are they generous? Do they pay that forward? So as I mentioned, we have a lot of work to do. We turned 10. I'm not 30 anymore. I'm 40. I'm running out of time. So we want to make sure that we're able to go faster. We want to help more and more people get clean water. You know, raising $220 million in our first 10 years is great for a lot of nonprofits, but it's a fraction of what we thought we would be able to do. So we continue to hope to grow the organization. We've worked with a lot of amazing brands. Over 100 brands have helped us with zero marketing budget. We've done it all with no marketing budget, all influencer marketing, all working with brands, taking the story out. And hopefully some of you that have never heard of us might be interested in working with us. You can reach me at scott@charitywater.org. Thanks for giving me your time.